false flag operations that everybody wants to know about. Now, if the concept of a false flag operation is actually just a conspiracy theory and that there has never been anything confirmed about it, then we must be of the mindset of those totally resistant to something that's so obvious about human nature. Because what is the false flag operation but concealing your hand, like in a card game or a child trying to get away with its mischief? Well, it's thinking that the mischief is necessary because that's what it's focusing on in its little life. The child thinks that the whole world revolves around this thing that they need to do. It's their own obsession. So, of course, it wants to operate without any um, obstacles. It wants to hide what it's doing. It wants to conceal it. It wants to act with impunity. This is what a child does. You can see that quite obviously. Almost every child that I've ever observed has this behavior. So why would a conspiracy theory be completely doubtful if it's just a mirror of things that even a child can see? A child learns this from other children. But aside from this analogy, if you don't get it from this point, look at the different groups of people as they face this so-called conspiracy theory of a false flag operation. Some people don't want to believe it because they're the ones that are gullible and they're the sheeple that want to believe what the government cover story is. But you have to understand the true purpose of the government cover story. That is to, almost like what an attorney does in court, they're not interested in facts. They're just interested in piecing together a narrative that is convincing enough either to a jury or the judge so that they can win against the other side. It's a conflict of stories. It's not about facts. It's what you want to present to the world. If the government wants to present that to the world, you have to make consideration of the context of what the other countries are saying. One nation versus all the other nations. They're trying to create a story or a narrative to the others so that somehow some judge can decide amongst them, because there's no nation that's righteous. And that makes you wonder, well, if a government does something and it's unethical or it's devious or it's dishonest, quote unquote, what is honesty in a government? We never really use that principle of qualification. We use it to an individual, and you swear either on a Bible or you just swear and you say the truth and nothing but the truth, or just the facts when they're doing investigation or they're conducting a criminal trial. But how is it with governments? We never really talk about a government being honest. We talk about a politician possibly, but with a government it's kind of on a whole new level where you almost can't say that, maybe because it's ridiculous to say that a government is honest. Of course they're not honest. It's just a collective coalition of people, or a cartel, or a dictatorship, or a shadow government at best. How do we want to describe the ulterior motives of the government, which they're conducting constantly, and they don't want anyone to know? As I said, they need to conceal what they do. The government can't be anything more than a child who's up to mischief. It is quite obvious. People that don't want to understand that are people that like to believe the cover story that the nation is trying to sell to the world. They just like the world to be black and white. They don't like to choose between different stories between the facts that are not included in the particular official government story. They are not people that have any discern. They are not people that have any discriminating tastes. They just decide. People are very two-dimensional. People are very unthinking. They don't want to do any thinking. They don't want to do any questioning. This is the kind of person that doesn't understand the conspiracy theory about the false flag operation in general, the definition of the false flag operation. However, what is the government really doing? Are they trying to conceal what they're doing? Because it's just almost as if they want you to know. Like the people that do think and question, they want you to know because that will put more fear into you. Because the ultimate weapon of the government is fear. FDR once said to the nation when he ran the country for 4 consecutive terms, we have nothing to fear but fear itself. How is he saying that? Are we to take that in the typical way that we want to be optimistic and positive about it? Is he telling us that do not fear because fear is a thing that isn't real? It's just created to make us fear it. It's fear itself. Is he saying that? Is he saying don't fear it? Is he saying be strong and wake up and don't fear anything? Is he saying that by that statement? Or is he saying focus? Don't fear anything else. Don't fear the boogeyman. Don't fear another country. Don't fear death. Is he saying don't fear any of those things? Anything else that you can think of? But he's putting your focus and saying fear itself. He's saying we have nothing to fear, but you better be fearing fear itself. He may have wielded the power of fear itself by a very subtle way of talking to the nation, softly, but at the same time, he was injecting them with a fear that has never been so concentrated and perfected up until then, and continued on even after his reign ended in 1945. And since then, the United States was sealed in the #1 position of the world to be the ruling superpower. And how do they operate? What is their weapon? What's the ultimate weapon that they use? Fear itself. So it can be argued that when he announced that, he was unveiling the secret weapon. And he knew how to use it. After all, he conducted World War II as the chief executive officer, as the commander-in-chief of the combined military forces of that nation. Definitely doesn't look like he got rid of fear out of the people. Looks like he used fear against the entire world and the citizens of the U.S. So, having said that, what is the government really trying to do with a false flag operation such as Pearl Harbor? To give you a historical example of what the theorists say is a false flag operation. It's such a glorious moment, an episode where the nation is caught unawares. Oops, we just got blasted at the Hawaiian naval base. We're completely, utterly destroyed. So that punch will wake you up. Oh, that will stir up a lot of fear, and the typical response to the adrenaline rush of fear is anger and rage and fight. That's what it is. There is a psychological premise that it can lead to fight or flight, but in order to initiate that series and that decision, you have to create the shock to the system that is going to bring up the adrenaline. It's going to bring up the issue or the that moment, that emergency that will force a decision. It forces the hand of the nation. France's hand was forced. That's why they rallied afterwards. It's like, if you're the government, you have to punch the people. That bears repeating. So, ponder on that. Why would the United States under FDR, who's such a great leader that did so many things to bring the American people out of the Great Depression and bring the world out of the Great Depression, if that's what he really did, and then all of a sudden this big military conflagration, this World War II, how could they not see the attack of the Japanese coming after more than 2 years of embargo where they weren't allowed to get necessary raw materials and fuel for energy? They were blocked off from petroleum. Even in the 1930s, going into the 1940s, it was known that you can't run industry, you can't be a powerful nation with your machines unless you have the fuel. So it stands to reason that they just sat there contemplating the fact that, when is Japan going to attack? Let's open the way for that. Let's stir that up to happening. It is one nation to another nation. So the narrative is that, oh, they attacked and they caught us unaware. This is they stabbing a person in the back. It's so unfair. Now we can really attack them. Now we can declare war. That's exactly what's happened with France. Now they're declaring war on an enemy to get their focus off of any other force. See, the government does not want to be your enemy. It wants to be your controller, not necessarily your friend. But it's better to have a friend of your government rather than to have a friend in the enemies outside of you, because the enemies outside of you don't do anything. So we need to punch the nation. That's the false flag operation. And you need to be told the things about it that make you really angry against the other force. So they're telling you that this Islamic threat, this Islamic militant, Islamic jihad, these terrorists, these enemies of the state, the enemies of Europe, the enemies of France, the enemies of even a radical leftist liberal newspaper, even those people who were the victims of Islamic terrorism. Because you see, they're poking fun at the prophet. So, in the liberal free democracy of the West, we allow that, of course. But later on, we can use this to say, like, well, there's a weak spot. They don't really support the government. So, you know what? They're expendable. Just put a hit on them. Make it look like the Islamics did it. And these Islamics are the patsies. And then all of a sudden, oh, you want to read more of this here. The Islamics will then be targeted. They will be the scapegoat. They will take the blame. They are the focus of the false flag operation. Now we can rally against it. That we can rile up the nation and all the citizens for war, because the response is going to be fight. That is their response now. It's going to be fight. And that's the only way to initiate it. That's the only way to garner enough support. That's the only way to get all the other politicians in line. So there is a force within the government, and right now it seems like France is coordinating with Germany, is coordinating with the UK, is coordinating. Obviously Israel's involved because Netanyahu was at the rally. So